Path of Hurricane Hilary, the storm rapidly intensifying very quickly here, and forecasters do warn the hurricane's path could bring significant impacts to Southern California and the Southwest by the end of the week into the first part of next week. Kim Wood is an associate professor at the University of Arizona and joins us now to talk more about the storm. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first off, just break down the latest path of the storm. I know sometimes, when you're several days out, it can kind of be a little difficult to fully figure out. But where does the storm sit right now, and where does it look like it's heading?
So right now it's still off the coast of Mexico, fairly far south of Baja California, moving west-northwest for the short term, but the large-scale flow is expected to shift, and that will allow the storm to take a more northward track due to how the ridge will shift to the east and a low-pressure system will come in from the west.
And if it does strike California, as a lot of the cones appear to show at this point, is it likely to hit as a hurricane, tropical storm, depression? What do we expect?
So right now, the guidance is indicating that it may be at tropical storm intensity, which remember could be a maximum wind speed of 40 miles an hour, and that would be the maximum winds near the center. A bigger thing to focus on is the fact that the storm is not a point. As you can see on this graphic that shows the satellite view, the storm is fairly large, and where that intensity of winds near the center does not necessarily relate directly to the impacts that might be felt farther from that center.
And let's talk a little bit about what's known as the cone of uncertainty, because a lot of folks do think that that is the exact path it's traveling and that the edge of the cone itself is how far the winds are spread out, but that's obviously not the case. Break it down for me.
So the cone of uncertainty is constructed from the past 5 years of National Hurricane Center forecasts. How good are those forecasts with respect to where the storm will be? And about 2/3 of the time, it's within that cone. But that means 1/3 of the time it could have been outside that cone, and specifically the cone focuses on that center that I mentioned before. So the cone just shows sort of the wiggle room for where that center might be located at a given time, and as we go forward in time, the cone extends farther up the coast because we expect the storm to travel in that direction. But again, the cone specifically focuses on that center. It doesn't highlight the size of the storm nor where we would expect the impacts to take place.
And we are talking a lot about California. As you can see there, we're talking maybe San Diego, Los Angeles to see the effects. But it sounds like, based on the way that the storm is tracking right now, that there should be effects in multiple states, correct?
Yes, so before it crosses the latitude of the border between California and Mexico, we do expect this storm to be impacting Baja California, and that has some terrain along it which will affect what kind of shape, structure, and intensity the storm has when it does eventually reach California. And as it moves north, the storm may change in shape and size. And to the east of the center, that's where we would expect impacts from possibly wind, but definitely rain. And since the terrain of northern Mexico and the southwestern US is not flat, some of that rain could be intense and cause flash flooding issues.
Is it possible that we do see this hurricane strengthen even more? At last check, I know it's a Category 2, but could it strengthen even further as it does continue that trek there?
Yeah, so as you see it on the satellite right now, the storm has a strong structure. The eye is starting to appear in this infrared satellite imagery, and the ocean's quite warm. There's a lot of moisture in the air. It's really humid down there, and there's not much in the way of wind shear, which is a change in wind speed or direction with height. So the storm can stay nicely stacked, and that helps it take advantage of the energy that is present to continue intensifying. So yes, we do expect this storm to continue intensifying. National Hurricane Center is calling for it to be at least a Category 3 hurricane at its peak, which is a major hurricane. And that doesn't mean it's going to be a major hurricane when it gets closer to California, but it is poised to use the quote-unquote ingredients that are present for intensification to continue strengthening.
How often do we see a hurricane or even a tropical storm actually strike a part of California?
It's rare. If any of you have ever gone swimming off the California coast, it's quite a bit cooler water-wise compared to, say, the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic coast. And hurricanes also notice that that is comparatively cold. As a result, hurricanes or even tropical storms striking California is quite rare. There was the San Diego hurricane from 1939, but in the period of record that the NHC offers, since 1949, we've only had a handful, and they're usually tropical depressions, barely tropical storms, or possibly even post-tropical, which is a word that the NHC has been using for Hilary's ultimate fate once it gets into the southwestern United States.
Is there a big difference in hurricanes when you're talking about over in the Atlantic versus the Pacific?
So the underlying physics is the same, but the conditions in which they form are different, which then affects their characteristics. Things like how quickly they can intensify, where they form in the first place, and how large or small they are. The storms that we get in the Eastern Pacific tend to be a little smaller, but then we get cases like Hilary where they form in really moist areas over really warm water out of what we call the monsoon trough, and that helps them be bigger to start with. As we can see in this loop, Hilary is a fairly sizable storm, and that will affect how it behaves as it moves northward.
And explain to me the concept, and we kind of talked about this already, but just rapid intensification, because it seems like Hilary did gain some strength very quickly. I don't know if folks did think that it was going to intensify into a hurricane, but I mean, it gained power pretty fast.
Yeah, the guidance was pretty keen on saying, yes, this storm is likely to intensify and reach hurricane strength. The ingredients I mentioned before, if we have a lot of moisture, real humid, you know, the kind where you go outside and it's air you can wear, really high temperatures for the ocean, and then not much in the way of winds changing with height, if those are all present at the same time and the storm structure is starting to get organized, it can then take advantage of it like it had just eaten 10 power bars or something.
I might need a power bar. All right. Thank you so much, Kim Wood. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and help break all this down for us. I'm sure we'll be in touch a lot over the coming days, because at this point it looks like the effects could be seen in the coming days, but possible, I guess, real heavy effects there maybe Sunday, Monday.
Yeah, so we're looking at impacts largely from rain, but also potentially from some winds, again, on the order of like 40 miles an hour or so, that low-end tropical storm strength, as the system does approach California, possibly areas into Arizona and Nevada.
All right. Anything you want to add before I let you go?
The biggest thing to focus on here are going to be those rain impacts, making sure you're prepared for a lot of rain to fall all at once if you happen to be in an area under advice by National Hurricane Center. Those key messages, real important to pay attention to, and then anything from WPC, who focus more on the excessive rainfall likelihoods.
All right, Kim, thank you again for taking the time to be here.
Thank you again for having me.
All right, everybody, and I do want to take a full look right here at the storm. That is Hilary, a Category 2 storm at this point. There is a chance that it could intensify a little bit further here, but likely to make landfall in the next few days or so, likely Sunday into Monday. But as a tropical